and welcome to Women to Women. I'm Carol Paz, your hostess for tonight, and we have a very special guest that we're just about to introduce. But first, I'd like to welcome CarsonNow.org as our partnering sponsor. When you want to watch Women to Women and you want to see the local Carson City news, go to CarsonNow.org. We'd also like to welcome Apex Security Consulting Firm, who teaches personal safety as well as corporate safety. We'd also like to thank the Nevada Appeal and the Record Courier for supporting Women to Women. And as always, they would encourage us to shop our local businesses. So let's turn now to Doreen Mack. And Doreen, I'd like to welcome you very much to Women to Women.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Doreen, I haven't had much opportunity to get to know you before, to talk with you before, but I understand that you are a local Northern Nevada resident and a Carson City resident. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of unusual for us. Where did you grow up around this area?
Here, right in Carson City. I'm third generation from this area.
Now, when you say you're third generation, where did the first generation come from?
Lucca, Italy. My grandfather had come over here from Lucca, Italy, and worked on a ranch out in Dayton, Nevada.
Okay.
And my family was all there and lived in Gardnerville and lived in Carson City, and they just, it's been here forever, actually, my whole family.
So these would be your great-grandparents. Mm-hmm. And when your great-grandparents came, I'm guessing that they did not know English, so they learned their English in part working on the ranches. Mm-hmm. And then your grandparents, descendants of the great-grandparents, what did they do?
Well, there's all this. It's one of those things where when you're growing up with these, and I never met them because most of my grandparents all died when I was very young, an infant on both sides. So I never had that opportunity. The one grandfather, though I was raised across the street from him. And he had a house over by Smith's where the grocery store is, in a field that was there for many years. He died at the age of 93.
Bless him.
And loved that man, and he could speak Italian fluently and did up until he passed away.
So where Smith's is today, we're just open fields. Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. So you have seen a lot of change.
Oh, many. When I was very young, we had a population of 5,000 people. Went to school here, and it was a small community then, and we were a sure enough city with lots of shops and grocery stores and all those elements that make up a city. Post office, bank, a movie theater, all located in the heart of Carson.
And yet it was the capital as well. Mm-hmm. So what was it like thinking, here is this small community of 5,000, which is basically a village, nice-sized village, but we happen to be the capital of the state of Nevada. How did that work in your mind as a teenager growing up? Did you think all capitals must be this small, this size?
I never thought about it. I got to tell you, I just never did. My grandfather worked at the Capitol, and he was a custodian there for years. And it was just one of those communities where everybody knew everybody, and there wasn't anything you couldn't do that the whole family didn't know about before you came home. So it was just those things that spread through the whole community. So, I had relatives on the police force, on the fire department. One of them was head of the newspaper. It was just a very, very tight community back then.
Okay, kind of like an extended family actually.
Yes.
What were some of the favorite places that you like to go to when Carson City was 5,000?
Wow, that was a long time ago.
Well, you mentioned a movie theater, right?
We went to the movies. The movies was the weekend place where everybody hung out at.
Was Carson High School built at that time?
Yeah.
As it is today?
Carson High School here was now what's known as middle school, which is on 5th Street, at the end of 5th Street there.
All right.
And that was our high school. And Borderwick Bray was the junior high, the big brick building that's on King Street.
Right.
And my dad, going to school here, it was like a population of 500 people. He still remembered the dirt streets. And I mean, it was a very, very small community back then. So it was just fascinating to watch as Carson City was growing and things were changing.
When do you remember, if you go back in your memory, when real change, growth, and constant development, was that during the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s? When did you sense that Carson was beginning to explode population-wise?
Actually in the 70s, when I had gotten out of school and I had left and come back about, I don't know, a year later, it seemed like Carson City had doubled in size. It just went berserk. The medians had come into town, and that was part of the Johnson administration beautification process. And
President Johnson, yes.
Yes. And when they did that, they took the parking off Main Street, so now Carson City was becoming a freeway. So at that time is when you saw great change happen here.
And how much input do you, when you look back on those days or on those particular years, it must have been very shocking to the population who had grown up here all of their lives to see this sudden, deliberate, progressive stance towards becoming a city.
Right, it was.
And with that kind of explosive growth comes all kinds of situations to deal with, decisions to make or not to make. Why did you come back to Carson City?
Oh, well, because of my family being here, and that was a whole other life that I had back then. And I had come back here and to actually be around family. Well, I stayed, but I've also left. My husband and I, in 1980, took a trip around the United States for a year, took our children, and we were going to live anywhere but in Carson City. And so in our journey across the states, we were in Mystic, Connecticut, and found a beautiful Victorian on top of a mountain and loved it. That was where we thought we were going to live. And all the residents there said, this is not a place you want to be in the winter. They all leave and go to Florida. So taking their advice, we just kept traveling around the country and found places in Tennessee that were beautiful. But you have to compromise somewhere. And you either have very severe winters or hot, muggy summers. And for each place that you go to, it would have its own, trademarks of things that we really weren't happy with as far as raising our children in. So as we just kept going and then decided that a year later that we would come back here. And we lived at Tahoe for a few years and then moved back down to Carson City and, still travel, around and but stay here, make this our home.
There's something about the spaciousness of the desert and the size of these mountains that brings you back home. That brings you back home.
It is. It's a whole different feeling, like when you're in the Midwest and you've got those miles of cornfields, and when you're raised around the mountains, there is a certain protectiveness about being surrounded by them.
And it's in your personality development, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
You missed those.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you came back to Carson City, Doreen, and you took a look at all of this change, and the downtown parking had been completely transformed or was on its way to being transformed into a freeway. What happened to the downtown? Were there malls at that time developing? Was it becoming an urbanized small city with outreaches being made way beyond the boundaries of what was the old Carson City?
Yeah, the malls started to come in, big box stores, which we hadn't had before. Because there was no parking on Main Street, the shops started to close up, and we started to lose them one by one. And the last one that hung on was Myers Hardware, which is where the Secretary of State building is now. Wonderful man. His name was Lad Furlong, and he had told me just before he closed that he could no longer run a store where he no longer had parking, and with all the outside diversities coming in with the malls and that was it for him. He couldn't compete with all that anymore.
And that must have made an impact on you. Because today you find yourself in a challenging position as a resident, again, of Carson City, as a business owner. And that challenge, as you see it, is what?
Well, let's see, from 1996 until 2006, I had a business downtown. And I had a retail store and was instrumental in working on Telegraph Square. I had named it, had the signage for it, designed the signage for it, had all the businesses that were in the area. All of them had their name on a little arm that came out and would point to where their business was. And it was a wonderful place. And I had music piped out to the square. And it was the first time Carson had experienced any retail since the late 60s, early 70s. And I really had a passion to bring that back. And I had recruited 11 businesses into the area, retail businesses. And we were all doing it was wonderful, except none of us could have anticipated the economy going where it did. And it took a nosedive. And when to add to it, when all the construction happened up on Topsy Lane where Ross's and Marshall's and that is, it sucked away what was here away. So it was, again, it was going back to nothing for quite a while.
It has been a roller coaster ride of sorts
It has.
for Carson City. Okay, now you have a background in design. Where does that background come from? Where has your education come that you're now bringing, that we're going to talk about in the second half, to this project that you're working on for downtown Carson City? Where your love of design was tempered and it was allowed to develop in what educational environment? Did you go to a school of design?
I have all kinds of... I have an associate's in design. I've traveled all around. I'm educated in continuing education all over. I'm certified in all kinds of, and I just continue still to do that. I actually grew up in a train, and I never really realized that would become a historic monument later in my life, which it had. And it was my brother, sister, I, and my parents, and
you lived in a car of a train.
Car,
Okay. Here in Carson City?
It's the number 2 car missing at the museum. Is this car, and it was across the street from Smith's, where my grandfather's house was, and that's it. But I was always the one that would be out in the yard putting artificial flowers around the trees, and I just had a real knack to want to do that. And then as I got older, I got involved in modeling, and that was a natural transition for me to go from that into textiles and color.
Fabrics.
And, yeah. So that's where it led me in that road, and I just had a real passion for it and still do.
Well, we're going to come back in the second half to the train home, okay? So don't go away if you want to find out what was in the train. Be right back.
Pets of the Homeless is a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization that provides pet food and veterinary care to the homeless and less fortunate in local communities.
With donations from the public, we're able to provide homeless shelters with crates, bowls, cleaning materials, so that homeless with pets can come into homeless shelters and get the services that they need to get out of homelessness.
Welcome back again to Women, our second part. And we'd like to thank our sponsors for this half, Villa Bass Deli and Cafe, home of Pete's famous Bass Chorizo, as well as Carpa Nevada LLC, importer of fine Portuguese olive oils, balsamic vinegar, and international teas. We're with Doreen Mack, who's a real Carson City kid. Okay, welcome back again, Doreen.
Thank you.
You know, I was intrigued after the first half when you said your family lived in a car from a train. That is neat. And I can imagine that your creativity brought a lot of joy and color into as well as outside of that car. Just in a brief 30 seconds or a minute, what was it like to live in a railroad car as a kid? I would have thought Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn all over again.
No, it actually was just a part of life.
Okay.
You did not even realize that that's what you were living in, you know, and it really didn't become an icon really for us until we got older and realized that this was part of the train missing at the museum. Then it became wow, you know. But that was way later in my life. But yeah, it was small and it was home, and that's where we lived.
I think it's really cool. I love it. I love it. You're the first person I've ever known who had that opportunity. Okay, those days could in some ways return, right? Some ways. But let's push on. Doreen, you have a very special project that you are really spearheading for the downtown area of Carson City, the historic, would you call it the historic renovation or the return of Carson City unto itself? How would you define, in your own words, what you're really interested in accomplishing here for downtown Carson City?
Well, to create a historic downtown, we had lost it way back when, and during that process, we lost our shops and the quaintness that made it that. We were considered where Smith's is, if you think of it in that terms. We were on the outskirts of town, so the bus did not go that, we were too far. So we had to walk to school. And so in that process, you're walking down the streets and all the merchants would be cleaning their sidewalks and they all knew you by name. And you had that real community and that feeling of safeness. And
connectedness.
Yes, so it was wonderful. And when I had my store downtown, we'd also created that. And we would celebrate every event that there was. 9/11, for instance, was a huge day. And we all came out and put flags up and just came together. The whole town came together as a community during then. But I really had a goal to make it, I don't know so much as it was, but better than that for now. You know, it's like, let's work with what we have now and how we can make it better.
Let's take the best of who we are and continue to grow in that direction.
Yes.
All right. And you know, from an outsider's point of view, my observations as an outsider before I lived here, a part of what attracted us, my husband and I, to Carson City was the quaintness of the downtown, the historical aspect of the downtown. It was completely different than Reno, where we were staying, and I like Reno, but I really loved Carson City, and we were on our way to Tahoe. And here was this absolutely delightfully lit Christmas time Carson City at night. I was taken, never realizing I was going to be coming here a few years later. So I understand when you say there is a special look about Carson City that I haven't seen. I haven't seen anywhere else.
Well, and a lot of people don't know that we were once a real city that had all those elements that make up a city. And there was a period about 5 years ago where the city had made up a downtown plan, and it was absolutely beautiful. It had wider sidewalks and a whole landscaping plan, and the medians were gone, and there was parking on Main Street. And a couple years ago, I was reading on the news, had these headlines how Carson City was rated #1 in the nation, hit hardest by the economy. And I thought, wow, you know, what are we doing to change this? And I believe that starts with the downtown core and then radiates out like a pebble in the water. You know, you get those ripples. And I watched it over the years as it deteriorated, the neighborhoods around it starting to deteriorate. So my goal was to see what we could do to start working on the downtown core. So I asked them what had happened to the plan, and I was told that it would never happen because it was $12 million. And I said, well, then why?
The price tag.
The price tag. I said, well, then why aren't we working with what we have so we can start working on something? And I was told to put together a plan. So I was hooked up with Lee Plummel, the city planner, and he's been wonderful. And with the engineers, we worked up a plan for parking, leaving the medians there, taking down the fence. The only part of that fence,
wrought iron fence?
The wrought iron fence. The only part of that that's original is in front of the Capitol building, and that will stay. With the fence up, it is not welcoming, and there is no retail business that will open it with it up because you have no direct access to your store for either you or your customers.
There is an awkwardness about it, that is true.
So that was the goal, to put in parking and take down the fence, and then marketing it for retail businesses and supporting the businesses that we have down there. And so as to date, we've gotten that $12 million figure down to $40,000. And so this has been, it has been a great, great thing.
Doreen, how do you do that?
Well, we are not doing anything that is structurally taking anything out. We are doing it with paint. And it's just basically taking those outer lanes of Main Street, striping it with paint. We're doing parallel parking because with the medians, there's no room to do diagonal.
Right.
We've had business meetings with all the business people downtown.
So you'd come down one way and go back another.
Yeah, one way on each side.
All right.
And I just believe that's one step. That's one step into creating this whole feeling for down there.
So have you generated a spirit of renewal and a spirit of cooperation amongst the majority of the retail business people?
Yes, we've had business meetings. We had a huge one where the stakeholders and the business people were all invited to come to this meeting and for their opinion, and all of them agreed that we need to do something because every business is struggling. The economy is still very, very difficult.
It's very fragile.
It is, very. And so they basically were all, there may be a couple, one particular it's not, but basically they're all for this. And it's to create business in the downtown area.
Okay, so to be, as we say, fair and unbiased, all right? All right. The majority are definitely looking forward to this kind of a transition.
Yes.
So if we have others who are saying, well, hey, not so fast, what's the other side of the penny? Okay, what is their concern that they bring up that this might not be agreeable?
It's kind of confusing because the one that's not for it, truthfully, is the gas stations, let's say. So, and it's because they don't it's the understanding that, you know, if traffic keeps moving through town and I have follow traffic to not see one car stop, and when I am talking to other people out there in the community, the citizens, that will be the first thing I'll say. We just want to drive through town. We don't want to have to stop. But if you don't stop, you aren't supporting the businesses downtown, and that's the purpose for this. We need traffic to slow down. We need traffic to stop. We need to work on getting more businesses in the downtown area.
Right, and as the traffic slows down and the pace of the traffic in terms of speed, it gives you an opportunity to see the store windows.
It does.
The names of the stores.
Right.
And right now, it's kind of hard to do that.
Right.
And believe it or not, it has a tremendous impact.
A huge impact.
Yes.
And since the freeway has now bypassed the downtown core and goes to Fairview, business has dropped downtown 35%. And that's just hurting these people tremendously.
Very much so.
When it's completed, the rest of the direction, and we've got people from the lake and Gardnerville, who we still get some of that traffic now, but if they can just pick it up right there and just go all the way around, what's their point for coming down here? Why should they come if there's nothing to bring them down? So that's why now it's important to work on this, to work on a downtown core, and to have all this established before that is completed.
Okay, one of my questions would always be, you're essentially competing against a freeway. Eventually, a freeway that has a much longer connection to it from the lake, from Lake Tahoe, all the way around Carson City and then on up. How do you compete? You're saying that if we bring our Carson City downtown retailers into a spirit of cooperation, that they will take the initiative to do whatever cosmetics they need upon their storefronts, because I come from a small town where a freeway bypassed the town, and the town did exactly what you're saying, died down to almost no traffic.
Right.
But these are long-established families, long-established names in business. And do you think people will be willing to come back and support those local businesses because they know those people, they love the customer service if it's given to them, that compete with that freeway?
Yeah, I think we just need to create that environment. You know, we have to make it an environment that is something that has, we need to make it walkable, friendly town where people aren't afraid to cross the street. That's become a big thing. They're crossing 4 lanes of traffic. You know, where you can bring kids, where we can have events and close off the streets. And when we do that, it's just huge on the events that are down there and how the businesses thrive on that. I mean, to have them down there. Okay,
is there another opportunity coming up soon where people that are interested in this discussion, they can either come in to listen, they can come in to participate? Is there some way that they can find in person more information to hear about this project?
Well, we will be doing a Board of Supervisors meeting, which is the approval of this project. But besides watching the paper and seeing what's going on in the general community, that's just, it's been a project that we've been working on for 2 years just about, and the whole thing, getting it set up for this. And it's just the steps, the beginning stages of this. There will be signage that will be on both entrances coming into Stewart Street.
Okay.
One from 50 and one from 395.
So that's where this project would take place, essentially.
Well, it will
From
say
Stewart-
you were entering the downtown historic district, and you can take the Stewart bypass. So you have a way to go straight around without drive. You don't have to drive right through Carson. It will start there. We'll start at 50 and make that transition on 395 and 50, and the parking then starts at Robinson Street to 5th Street. It's just that downtown core, the historic downtown core. And that's the beginning of this project.
So do you feel that the public is supportive of this, that they are behind you, that they see the plans, they see the potential there?
There's a lot of them who are. I get a lot of support. There's many who don't, because they don't understand. And they don't understand the impact of what it's doing to the businesses that are there. And when you have a business, it's different than just being a person that has a job, it picks up a paycheck every week. You are dependent upon the economy. You're dependent upon the people to support you, to bring you business. I mean, that's how it works. And when I start having this discussion with them, and how important it is to create this synergy, to have the cars on Main Street. It's not so much that we're getting all this parking, but it tells you that somebody's home. It's like if you go to a mall and there's no cars out there, you aren't going to stop. I know business owners that own malls that will make their employees park out front, so it looks like somebody's there, and it creates that whole feeling of people wanting to shop there.
Yes.
So that's what it will do. That's the whole idea, is to create that whole synergy and walkable, friendly town.
And another point of encouragement to me, as a consumer, I have become wary of the large parking lots around malls for the safety factor. I like thinking about coming down to where there's a more controllable space.
Right.
Good lighting, intimacy of the stores, the connectedness of the stores, and I can walk in and feel that I am surrounded by a protective shield of people watching, people being down there, cars being there. And that may be a driving force that sends many of us out of the large big box environments, back into our communities, because we do feel safer there.
And boutique shops, that's a huge shopping factor for women. They're very attracted to that, something that's different, not the whole thing that everybody else has. And I also tell people that if you take the Virginia City or Truckee or Sutter Creek, these small towns, and if you took parking off Main Street and put up a fence, those towns wouldn't exist. It would say stay out. So it's that whole idea, and it's going to take
Open it up.
Open
it up.
And it's going to take some time. It's going to take some work, and hopefully it will be through cooperation and people supporting the project that this will be very successful.
Well, you are a small town gal, come back to a larger city, okay? But your roots and your heart seem to really be in the right place, because you do care what happens to your hometown. You do care about the businesses that have made this a thriving area to move into and to be a part of. So I compliment you, and I encourage you to continue to keep us informed. And you say, again, that very important meeting that will be the last discussion.
That will be the last discussion on this, yes.
Okay.
And there will be, there's comments in the paper all over the place regarding this. It's just, and this meeting is important so that people understand really what this is all about and the reason for doing it.
So we'll return to our Nevada Appeal and our Record Courier to keep track of you and the project, all right?
Yeah, we'll keep that
Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
I appreciate your time.
We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
We thank you for listening and being part of our viewership, and we look forward to seeing you next week with a brand new program. In the meantime, have a great evening. Good night.